Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Data Exposed. My name is Tim Hewer, I'm your host today. I'm joined by Raj Pochiraju, who is a program manager on the Azure Data Migration team.
Yep.
Tell us a little about what does data migration mean?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Tim.
Yeah, you're welcome.
For introducing me, and then hello everyone. So today I'm here to talk about the lift and shift migrations or seamless migrations to Azure Data Platform using our new service called Azure Database Migration Service.
And when we talk about lift and shift, that's a term that I've heard a lot. It's a buzzword that people use a lot in the industry. Yeah. What exactly does that mean to our users?
So lift and shift is also called as rehost your environment, which is essentially lift and shifting your environment into cloud with zero to minimal changes to your application code. Our focus of this session is primarily focusing on the database migrations. So today, I'm specifically going to talk about the two very important and significant Azure data offerings that we recently released at a Build conference. One is the Azure Database Migration Service, which helps the customers to migrate their on-premises databases to Azure Data Platform with frictionless and seamless migration experience. And the second offering that we did is Azure SQL DB Manager Instance. So essentially what Azure SQL DB Manager Instance is, it is also a platform as a service and a new deployment offer, which really provides 100% compatibility with your on-premises SQL Server instance model. Azure Database Migration Service as well, but before I go to the specific demo that I want to show here, let me take a minute and really explain how you can configure the Azure Database Migration Service in your environment to enable the migrations from your on-premises data estate to managed instance. Azure Database Migration Service is a native Azure service which helps customers to migrate from heterogeneous and as well as homogeneous platforms to Azure Data Platform. When it comes to homogeneous, you can migrate from SQL Server 2005 all the way to 2017 to either Azure SQL Server DB or Azure SQL DB Managed Instance or SQL servers which are running on the Azure VMs. You can also use the service to migrate from heterogeneous platforms from Oracle, Sybase, DB to Azure Data Platforms as well at the same time. So this will become as, also the service will provide an end-to-end experience. So this will become as a single stop for you that meets all your migration needs.
So your goal in the services you're providing is to get anybody's data, pretty much no matter where they have it, to the cloud.
To the cloud, yes.
Awesome.
Okay, so let's jump into the demo.
Let's see what it looks like.
Yep, sounds good. I'm going to switch to my demo environment here, just to set the context here.
And what we're looking at here is the Azure portal. So you're logged in.
Yeah.
Well, now what we're looking at is your
yeah, I want to set the
machine.
Context here, right?
Okay.
So
okay.
I
yeah,
have.
So this is the app.
Right. So I have my on-premises SQL Server instance, which is, I know I put a name as Jumpbox for MI, which has a couple of databases which are sitting on-premises at this point. As you see here, they're kind of running on SQL Server 2016. The databases are Sites EE and Stack Overflow EE. So both of these databases are used by the Stack Overflow application, which is a very popular application that most of our users almost use on a daily basis, especially the dev communities. So what we are going to be doing is we are migrating these two databases to a managed instance that I have here. So I already pre-provisioned my managed instance in the Azure portal. So the goal here is that we are going to migrate these two databases to the managed instance.
And so let's just back up real quick. So in creating the managed instance, is that just another resource option in the Azure portal?
Correct.
Okay, so fairly simple setup.
Very simple setup.
Am I looking for the term managed instance, or is it just that's the default now?
You're going to, the full name is Azure SQL Database Managed Instance.
Managed instance, okay. And so you just created that, created the resource, and now in Visual Studio you've connected to that instance.
Yes, through Management Studio, right? Yep. So I'm going to use my Azure Database Migration Service to perform this migration.
Great.
Okay. So like I said, Azure Database Migration Service is the native Azure service. So I log into the Azure portal to start in provisioning my Azure Database Migration Service. So when I go to my dashboard, you kind of look the view similar to this. The very first thing is, if you haven't created your Azure Database Migration Service, or if you haven't provisioned your Azure Database Migration Service, and if you're doing it for the first time, what you do is you go to the create resource here, and then you type for migration, and you will find Azure Database Migration Service here. You click on that, and then you click a create button here to provision the service to begin with.
And this is similar to other things that we've had. We're just kind of, again, creating the resource that we're about to use.
For instance, if you want a new SQL Server DB, right?
Yep.
You go to the portal and then create the SQL DB, which you call it provisioning the SQL DB. Same way
the difference here is we're leveraging a service rather than not the database endpoint at this point, because you already created that managed instance.
Correct. Okay. Right. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to create my Azure Database Migration Service here. I give some name to the service. And then I choose my subscription here. Here I want to create my database migration service in some staging migration service subscription. And then a couple of options here. One is the resource group. You can choose either existing resource group if you already have resource groups that you created, or you can also create a new resource group to keep all the services that are required, or all the resources that are required for this service will be created in that particular resource group.
Is it advisable to create, when you're doing the migration, is it better to create a new resource or to share resources?
You can, it's all preference when it comes to the DMS. DMS can, I call Azure Database Migration Services as a DMS as a short notice, right, a short term. So basically, it will allow you to create in the existing resource groups. It's all preference, customer preference at this point.
Okay.
So, or you can.
No requirement either way.
No requirement.
Great.
The other piece is the virtual network. This is the most important piece, because the virtual network that you are going to select here, which provides the DMS access to the source environment, depending on where your source exists.
The data I want to migrate
right.
to the cloud.
And as well as it also provides the connectivity to your target managed instance as well. So it is very important to choose the right VNet that facilitates both the source connectivity and as well as the target connectivity for the Azure Database Migration Service.
Okay, and so the VNet options that are there, that's also another Azure resource that I would have had to already configure, proper security, understanding what my network topology is, and things like that.
So that's you really went raised this network topology thing. So basically, we published a article on our doc site for Azure Database Migration Service, which really talks about the primary network topology scenarios that we think that majority of the customers go and then configure the Azure Database Migration Service depending on where their sources exist and where the managed instance is provisioned.
Got it.
So basically,
and so this is already documented.
It's already documented publicly.
All the different scenarios.
Yes.
So we'll put the link to this doc in the description.
Sure, we can do that. So I strongly recommend everybody go through this network topology document and find out which of the topology. We got 4 topologies that we described here. I'm going to go only one topology here. For example, if you go with on-premises to if you are migrating from your on-premises SQL Server to managed instance, one topology is you can have a single VNet where you can have both Azure Database Migration Service and as well as the managed instance will share that VNet. The only thing is they should be in a different subnets.
Got it.
Azure Database managed instance also provides a network isolation, one of the strongest or one of the important features. So you always want to configure managed instance in a separate subnet, and when you provision the DMS within the same VNet, make sure that we create a separate subnet within that VNet so that you can use that subnet to provision the DMS service.
Got it.
But they can still talk to each other because they are in the same VNet.
And all this information is in this.
It's documented.
Right. Okay, awesome. So we talked about the VNet.
Yes.
So now,
and when it comes to the on-premises sources, we need to make sure that we have a site-to-site connectivity between Azure and as well as on-premise environment. You can do that in 3 different ways. When you can use ExpressRoute, or you can use site-to-site VPN, or you can even use point-to-site connectivity as well. So there are 3 different options that you can use. And specifically, the scenario that I'm demoing today comes under this cloud-to-cloud migrations, where if your source is sitting in a SQL Server which is running on the Azure VM, then you can migrate the databases from Azure VM to managed instance.
Okay.
So
And that's the one that you're about to show.
I'm going to show that. So basically, again, the VM and as well as the DMS shares the same subnet, so there is no issues with that. On managed instance also in a separate subnet, but it ultimately shares the VNet as well.
Great.
And the other requirements is NSG rules, where these are the different security group rules that you might want to create on the Azure to enable these different access for Azure Database Migration Service. So those are all listed over here. When it comes to on-premises SQL Server, there are TCP/IP port that you need to open in your firewall to make sure that the DMS can talk to the source SQL Server. And also we need a 445 port needs to be opened. I'll tell you why we need that port in my demo.
Okay.
Right? This kind of a network topology that I want to make sure that we understand when we create this service, right?
Okay, so that was the VNet option that we were on right there. Got it.
And also, the DMS is currently the free. You can use this free service. You don't have to pay for it.
Oh, great.
You can use this free service to accelerate your migrations.
And just to be clear, the free aspect is the migration service.
Migration
not
service.
necessarily the managed instance,
Correct, you're
right?
right,
That
yeah.
has different
models
models and
pricing
options
model
there.
and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
got
And,
it.
right, so you go and then you provide all those options, and then you just go create this button, hit the create button. It will take around 8 to 10 minutes usually to create the service, but for the sake of the time, I already created a service for us to do this demo. So I'm going to close this window, and I'm going to go to a resource, the DMS resource that I already created here. I named the service as build demo.
So this is the result of the steps we just did.
Correct.
Okay.
And then you will see when you first log into the Azure Database Migration Service page, you will see the multiple tabs here. One is the Essential tab, where you will get all the information about your service to begin with. It will tell you which subscription that you created, which VNet, which subnets that you used for DMS. Remember we talked about network topologies?
Right.
And then also which specific region that the service is created as well. At this point, if you already migrated few migrations, then you will see those migration projects here. But if you did not create any migration projects yet, this list will become like empty, and it will really guide you to create a first migration project.
Okay.
So I'm going to create a migration project here.
So that's interesting. As you saw that list, just real quick as you're typing, I could use the same migration service for multiple migrations.
Correct.
Oh, that's
Yes,
cool.
exactly. So in terms of projects, right?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, it even looked like in the list too, I could use this service to migrate my Oracle project.
Correct.
And then my SQL project.
Right.
Okay, great.
So the other thing is, as you see here, there are, as I talked about Azure Database Migration Service, it supports multiple source and target pairs, right? You can see the list here, MySQL, SQL Server, and Oracle. And more source types are coming as we go to the next cycle of planning. And then I'm going to talk about that in my roadmap, what new sources and target pairs are coming into support.
Okay.
As you see here in the target, you can also see Azure SQL Database, Azure SQL Database MySQL, and managed instance as well. And then you just go and then create the button there, right? So I created the project already for us. Essentially, the next step is you provide the source information in the project creation, and you also select the specific databases that I want to migrate, and then you also provide the target information, and then you just
that's in the next step after you
next
there.
step. So basically, the reason why we have this project orchestration is, when we talk to a lot of the customers, they wanted to group it together, one or more databases into a project where their application has dependencies. So for instance, if your application, for example, I told you the Stack Overflow has 2 databases
right.
that it is dependent on. So you can create a migration project and add these 2 databases to that project. So you can migrate as a group.
So the service that you're seeing here, and as we look at this list here, running this migration is actually running all of those different, running this project is running all of those different migrations together.
Right.
I see.
Right.
So it's not really meant, when you added different migrations, it's not really meant to just kind of come back and add, I guess you could,
right.
But it's meant to say, oh, you have multiple things that you're migrating.
Right.
Use one service, group them together, run it, and it works.
Correct.
Gathers all brings all the dependencies together.
Right.
Okay.
So you did you created your migration project, and then when you click that migration project it essentially has a group of all these databases that you selected for migration. The next step is to create a migration activity. When you create a project, you haven't really migrated yet.
Right.
You just said, this is my source, this is my target, these are my databases that I want to migrate, and then you you kind of bucketed them into a project at that point.
We've created a schema of
so it's
the
kind of
network
intent.
topology, where to get the data from,
Correct.
where I wanted to get it.
So it's kind of intent that you want to migrate.
Yeah.
Now the next step is we provided as an activity here.
Okay.
So you can create an activity here. So today you only see run migration activity, but one thing that I mentioned is Azure Database Migration Service will give you an end-to-end migration experience, which includes a lot of these workloads you might want to assess first before even migrate. What it really takes to migrate my databases to cloud. How much effort that is required for me to make these changes. That is called, we call that as an assessment.
I see.
Those assessments will also going to come into the Azure Database Migration Service as an activity.
I see.
Today you only see migration activity, but you start seeing other activities as well.
Okay, so this will expand as options in the future.
Yeah. So I do run migration here, and then I'm going to, because when I provide remember when you create a project, we'll give the source information as well, right?
Right.
So I picked the source information from it, right? I already created that in my project. Now I only need to give a password here. Usually we don't store the passwords for the security reasons, so this is something that you need to re-enter the password just to make sure that.
And the password is, in this case, for
to
the source.
Yes,
yeah.
As you see here, we support both SQL authentication and as well as the Windows authentication to connect to the source. So let's give it a time. Now it is trying to connect to the source. The connection is succeeded. At this point, it's going to validate that do I have a proper connection semantics to connect to the source. If the connection fails, it will tell you why it is failed.
Right.
And it also tell you how to troubleshoot this thing as well.
Is it not just the evaluating that, yes, I can reach the database, but you mentioned
also
semantics, can I perform the actions I need to do on that database?
Right. It's also going to check, very good point. It's also going to check do I have the right kind of permissions to begin with to do this migration.
Because I may be able to be successfully authenticated and just select star from table, but that's not going to be sufficient for this operation.
So now I'm moving on to the next step where I want to provide the password for the target as well, right? Which is my manager instance in this case. So I click on that, and then now it is trying to connect to the target information and then find out, do I have the enough privileges to do the migration?
Same thing, except this time on the target.
And these are the two databases that I selected in my project, which I did not show you that experience, but when you do a create project, you will select the DBs that you want to migrate. I want to migrate both of those databases. And now here is the most important screen comes, which is the migration settings. I'm going to take a minute here to explain what these settings are really mean to us.
Okay.
So
we still haven't started the migration.
No, not yet. We're just trying to configure the migration settings at this point.
Okay.
So when we do the migrations from on-premises SQL Server to managed instance, the technology that we use backup and restores. So we take a backup of the source databases and we restore onto the managed instance. So for that we need a network location that is accessible by the source and as well as by the target servers, so that we can take the backup into that location at first, right? So let's configure that network location before we do that. So this time I'm going to create that network location within my source server itself,
which is the VM instance.
The VM. Okay. And here I got a plenty of disk space, almost a terabyte disk space exists, and my databases are not that large.
Should be enough for Northwind.
No, it's not. It's a Stack Overflow. It's not Northwind. So I created a backup folder already here. So what I need to do is I need to make sure that I enable the proper permissions to this network share, so that both source and target can access to it.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do properties here. I'm going to go to the sharing tab here, and I'm going to create a share. So when we do the backup, we let the source SQL Server to take the actual backup. For that reason, we need to make sure that the logon account, also called as the service account, that the SQL Server runs, should have read and write permissions on this particular share.
Okay.
So how do you find the logon account for the SQL Server to begin with? So you can use the SQL Server Configuration Manager, very familiar tool for a lot of the DBAs. You can open that. You can go to the SQL Server services here and locate your instance service here. Go to properties. You will find out that this specific service is running on a local account, agent VM user.
Okay.
So we need to make sure that we enable that share has an access to this user, right? So I'm going to remember this user here.
Agent VM user. I'll remember it for you.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. I'll go here, again go back to my backup here, and then I'll go to the sharing tab here, share, and see I already added here. Otherwise you just click this here and then because it is a local account and then you type that account.
Just find the user
right.
and enter it in.
Right, so that's one requirement that we need to make sure that we fulfill that.
And that was so we were on the VM instance where our source is. We created a new share, made sure that the permissions that the SQL service is running under has access to read-write to that share.
On the permission. So I'm going to take that folder. Here, when it comes to the network share, you can use either IP address or fully qualified domain name. In my case, there is no DNS resolution here, so I used the private IP address, because remember my topology is everything in the same VNet.
It's cloud to cloud.
Cloud to cloud, everything is in the same VNet. So I can use the private IP address.
Okay.
So I use the private IP address, whack private IP address, and backup location, right?
If it was another one of the topologies, again in that doc, it kind of outlines.
You might want to put the domain account.
Right.
Make sure that you use the fully qualified name in case if you use any network share server or something.
Got it.
Right. So here, once we take the backups, the next step what we do is we upload these backups to a blob storage.
In Azure.
In Azure.
Okay.
From there, we will restore it to the managed instance. So it's a two-step here. One is we take a backup to the network share. We upload the files from network share to blob storage. So we need to give that blob storage information as well.
Okay.
And remember, this blob storage is going to sit in customers' subscription only.
Okay.
We don't really host the blob storage in our subscription. It is all
another resource for that particular.
Everything stays in the customer subscription
account. Okay.
So I already created a storage account here. RajPoMI is my storage account. Now I need to make sure that I give a SAS key, which provides the access for DMS to access that the container that I created in the storage account.
Okay.
So I did that here. I can use this to create a SAS key. I can use this Storage Explorer preview option, and then this is my container that I created for this whole purpose. So my storage account name is Raj POMI, and this is my container. Here, I'm going to right click on that, get shared access signature.
Okay.
Everything is described in my tutorial documents and all that. I'm just showing it.
Yep.
So here I'm going to put my expiration date as June, rather than expiring it right now. And then we also make sure that we provide all these permissions: read, write, delete, and list permissions for that shared access signature.
And so what we're doing here is yet another permissions activity here.
For these
this time on the
target, on the storage account.
On the storage account.
Yep.
And the access key that you're creating here looks like we're given the ability to do a temporary
ability for the DMS to access that location, so that it can pick the files from
pull it out,
or put the files into it.
Okay.
Right.
And later pull it out, or is that going to be a different permission that it's also going to?
No, this is it.
Okay.
So I'm going to. That's the reason you have everything: read, write, delete.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm going to create that thing. So this is the SAS key that I got now.
Okay.
I'm going to copy it, go back to my the migration settings screen, right?
Yeah.
So I gave it here. So we took care of two things here. One is we provided the local network share, and we also gave the service account permissions to it. We created a SAS key where DMS knows how where to upload those files in the blob storage. The next thing is we also need to give a user and password that DMS is going to impersonate to read the files from that network share and upload to it.
Okay.
Right. So I'm going to use the same network user that I got. I'm sorry, the local user that I got for these purposes as well. If you create a different account, make sure that you go to the network share
and give that permission
as well. Okay. This time it's a read permissions, because I don't need to write, because I'm
just pulling it out.
Pulling it out
and to put it in somewhere.
I want to make sure that I type right. Okay, are we good? So I got all these settings that I kind of took care of it, and I'm going to hit a save button here. Now it is doing some validations to make sure that that specific network share has proper access or not. I'm just going to close this. It's going to do some validations on is the user that you provided has the read permissions on the network share to read it. is the SAS key is right,
And
SAS key,
storage account. And
storage account, all that stuff, right? I'm going to give an activity name here, run migration. And then there are few validations that we provided. So what you can do is you can perform some basic validations after the migration is done. One of those things you can do is, if you choose validate my databases, one of the options we provided is query correctness, which means is we take the top 10 queries that are executed on the source, and we replay those queries on the target after the migration is done, just to make sure that how those queries are responded to you.
How does it know which are the top 10 queries?
We query from the procedural in
the logs. And,
yeah.
Okay.
Query store. We get from the source query store.
Got it.
It's just to give some kind of a confidence for you that your top queries are working fine. And I know that I understand that we need to make more in-depth validations as well, but at least at the basic level, it tells you that these queries are
kind of a good
fine.
litmus test.
Yes.
Of,
For now, I'm just doing not validate. That's it. You just hit the run migration. Once you hit the run migration, you can start monitoring the status of that migration here. As you see here, it lists the databases. As we go into the future releases, what the plan is to provide a server-to-server migration experience, which means that not just limited to the databases, but also start migrating their logins.
I see.
Start migrating their SQL agent jobs, which is a lot of customers heavily use. SSIS packages. All these things are supported on the managed instance. So we want to enable migrations of those objects to managed instance as well. That way, you will get a entire server-to-server migration without really, doing the bits and pieces of migrations using different tools and all that stuff.
And so right now, I think that's a good distinction point. You mentioned that this migration is really just the pure data migration,
Correct.
right? So not any additional logins or anything like that. So
today, but we are going to add.
That's part of the roadmap.
As in the part of the roadmap, we are going to add pretty soon the login migrations,
okay,
the agent jobs migrations, SSIS packages, and all that. At that time, you will see all those data object types here. Today, you only see
just the database.
You just click on the database, and then see it's already restoring actually. So it already took remember that process, we took the backup to the network share,
took the backup,
upload to the cloud, storage, and then now it is already restoring it.
Restoring from storage.
From the storage, yes.
From the storage.
Yes.
Great.
So now.
And about how big was
it's already
the data
completed.
there?
One database is completed here. It's just 372 megabytes at this point.
That's pretty quick.
It is quick compared to.
I mean, for all the tasks that you just did, right?
Yeah.
Backup, put in storage, pull out of storage, restore.
Let's go back to my manager instance here. And then as you see, you don't see those databases here yet. I'm going to just do a refresh, right? Then you will see site EE and site Stack Overflow already restored.
And they're ready to go.
They're ready to go. You just go back to your application, change your application connection string. It should just, boom, should work.
And this is part of the seamless and friction-free that you were talking
migrations
about.
And lift and
For the
shift
app
migration.
perspective, it really just needs to execute the query and just tell me where to execute the query. Right.
Yeah.
That's
we
great.
have another service called Azure Migrate, where that really helps you to migrate the apps as well. In the sense, like if your apps are running on a VM virtual machine on premises or a different data center or something, and if you want to migrate it to
like app
to Azure, then you can use Azure Migrate service to migrate your app, the app servers, the VM servers, and then we can use Azure Database Migration Service to migrate the databases. That way you can have a comprehensive migration story to begin with.
And you can gradually as well, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the benefit is I'm ready to migrate my data,
sure.
may not be ready to migrate my app yet.
So I quickly wants to touch base on roadmap.
Yes.
So today we already released the DMS, the Azure Database Migration Service for general availability at our build conference last week. And then now, today what you have seen is we call that as an offline migration, where we take a backup and restore onto the managed instance. That requires a little bit of downtime. We understand that a lot of these enterprise customers, especially for the tier 1 workloads, they cannot accept a lot of downtime. For them, we are also introducing a minimal downtime migration experience. That is currently we are doing the private previews, or limited previews you can call. So if you are interested, I'm going to put the link where we can accept. We're currently accepting the nominations if you want to really participate in the private previews. So we're doing the private previews for migrating from on-premises SQL Server to SQL DB, migrating from MySQL to Azure Database MySQL. Same thing with PostgreSQL. So there are a bunch of scenarios that we are doing the private preview, as you see here, even from Oracle to SQL DB. So I'm going to put that link in there. If you're interested to experience our minimal downtime migration as well, just let us know.
And submit your I'm sure you'll ask kind of what their scenarios are.
Yeah.
And things like that.
The other significant features that we are working on is scale assessments of the data estate. A lot of these enterprise customers, they really asked us that, I have this big data estate and tell me, look at all my databases and tell me which of these databases are good fit for Azure SQL DB versus managed instance versus SQL servers which are running on the Azure VM with less effort that we could migrate. And also what would be my target tiering as well, right? There are a bunch of SKUs that we offer in each of these offerings. Then they want to understand like what is based on my current workload on the on-prem, what would be the best SKU that or the optimal SKU that I can really migrate to.
Okay.
The scale migrations are coming. Azure Migrate integration, I told you about app migrations. You can use Azure Migrate. We are trying to integrate those pieces into Azure, into the Azure Database Migration Service as well. And at last, Azure Data Box integration. We understand that enterprise workloads will have terabytes of databases.
Yeah.
And to migrate from using Azure Database Migration Service with that kind of a large database, think about 10 terabyte, 20 terabyte. It will take hours together or days together actually. So for that, what you can do is we have Azure Databox service, which is in the preview now.
Right.
That you can order the appliance. Appliance will be shipped to your on-prem. You just connect it to your network, copy all those files, ship it back to Microsoft. Then the DMS will know that those files are shipped back already. We'll restore it for you. Not only that, we also keep tracking all the incremental changes that are happened to in between the time that is being shipped. We'll apply those changes as well.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
And that's in limited preview right
No, that's which is coming in next few
coming.
months.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. And thanks for joining us on this latest episode of Data Exposed. Be sure to read the description notes where you have all these great links from Raj and his team. And also be sure to subscribe for more future content related to data. Thanks again for joining us. Take care.
Thanks so much.